Hi everyone, good afternoon and welcome to this afternoon session, our Poetry Africa session, where we'll be having four poets in conversation, looking at issues of democracies, tensions and intersections between democracy and humanities and arts. So my name is Adam Levine. I am a postdoctoral researcher at the African Center for the Study of the United States, which is based at Wits University. And essentially, this particular webinar is part of a bigger project. We're very grateful to collaborate with Poetry Africa on this specific one in particular. But what I just want to do is just give you before we get into our conversation between our four poets, I'm just going to give you a bit of background on this webinar itself in terms of how it came into being, the broader project as a whole, and then we'll jump straight to our conversation between the four fantastic poets. So the project itself falls under, in this particular webinar, falls under the project called Imagining Democracies. And this is an idea that we, as part of the African Center for the Study of the United States at Wits, we conceived it along with partners from University of Uppsala in Sweden, University of Sussex in the UK, as well as into the International Forum for US Study at University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. So together what we did, we had a couple of conversations, probably during the height of the pandemic. And what we decided to do, we came up with this concept of, put together a webinar series focused on this idea of imagining democracies. Now, as the name implies, the idea of imagining democracies is the idea of thinking through democracy. So what is democracy now? Okay. How do we define it now? What limitations does it have? How is it being impacted by all of systems of oppression that have come to define it? But also at the same time, as we imagine democracy, as we move forward, what kind of transformations? How could it transform? How can we look forward to a potential future? What could the future of democracy be? And as I said, we decided to ask these questions through a webinar series. And the idea was that we brought speakers from around the world. We've had speakers speaking in conversation with one another. We've had speakers from India. We've had speakers from Austria, the US, South Africa, of course, in conversation with one another, interrogating these particular questions. And so far, we've had two webinars in the series. The first one, we looked at issues of transformation, the idea of transforming democracy and its potential futures. And then our second webinar focused on the idea of the limitations of democracy and where in which it's being obstructed by racism, xenophobia, and other systems of oppression. And for this third webinar, we decided to look specifically at the humanities and the arts because all of us in this kind of consortium that we put together are all literature scholars. We all come from literature backgrounds. We have a love of literature. We do have some anthropologists as well in the mix. But ultimately, we are all humanities scholars. And so we all have a love for this kind of study of being human, of society. And we wanted to focus particularly on that. And so when we thought about this idea of conceiving of democracy, thinking of the idea of democracy in relation to the humanities and the arts, and the tensions and the intersections between them. So how does one perhaps shape and influence the other? The first thing we thought of course, we need to approach poets, because poets embody all these art forms. Poets are visual, poets are musicians, poets are writers. They embody all these unique particular art forms. And so together we brought together this amazing group of four poets who are today going to be in conversation with one another on these issues. And I just want to say thank you from the outset to Poetry Africa for bringing us on board, for embracing us. And just to say also that this webinar fits very beautifully into the themes that we look at throughout these webinars and throughout this fantastic program as a whole. The idea of social justice, the idea of democracy and moving forward. So we're very excited to have our four panelists, our four poets today in conversation. We told them to be as creative as possible. So we're looking forward to both the conversation, but also the creativity and the engagement. So thank you so much. I'm now going to give it over to Katlego, who is going to be our moderator for the day. And we're really looking forward to this session. So thanks so much, Katlego.
In the name of poetry, we offer you these words. Translations of thought and symbols of feelings that fester and ferment within. We offer you remnants of other poets who have metaphorically taken us to church, spoken the word, prayed for our souls as they bore their own. We offer you the time it takes to speak to our hearts and dare commit those vulnerabilities to memory. Tadi toko ka inehela. Nna mojalefa wa Bakwena le Basia, ngwana wa Kapa as well as Jozi. I offer you my perspectives, my many mothers' teachings. I present both moments of hopelessness and those that excite, taxing Gosi that makes me right. I offer you these butterflies of mine, if you accept the invite. In the name of poetry, we speak with you, in the hope that you find your own words and freedoms too. Offer others parts of yourself by being you. Pray for others in whatever form Mudimu chooses for you, and find Mudimu in your language too. Ikathato ya Mudimu di Badimo. It is in the name of poetry too that we have come to you. Hello, Dumelang. I am Katleho Kanoshuru, and I have the absolute honor of being part and moderating this wonderfully collaborative and global panel entitled Four Poets on Democracy, the Humanities and the Arts, Intersections and Tensions. I will be in conversation with Carol Watts, Philippa Yar de Villiers, Gina Athena Ulysses. The intentions that we have set for ourselves in this panel is that we create a space for us to breathe collectively and slowly together while conversing through poetry. Also, we have committed ourselves to not be so overburdened by the very loaded terms and very intertwined terms like democracy, like humanities, and even the arts, that we forget how we experience them, we collectively with you, and how these connect us. So as we touch on systems, on policies, on infrastructures that do not work, as we rage at reoccurring violations and call out spaces that were never designed for us to call home or even claim belonging, we also want to hold the light freedoms that friendship affords us when we build community through the arts. The questions our grandmothers ask us to keep our scholarly ethics in check, the language that Indigenous, queer, and Black feminist intellectuals are constantly giving us so that we can name our hurts, our desires, and existing practices. The mountains that also hold stories, the songs that sit with us in a way that other humans cannot. I'd like to introduce Carol Watts. Carol is a poet whose work is characterized by a deep attentiveness to perception as an aspect of ecological thinking. Her writing attends to lived and hidden histories of extraction, migration, and community. She often works on site-specific projects and in cross-arts collaborations. Carol is a professor in the University of Sussex, UK. Her most recent poetry collection, Cliptown, explores the UK South Coast as a hallucinatory and adaptive zone of inundation. Carol?
Thanks so much. That's a really beautiful opening, and it emphasizes the space that we're trying to open up here. And in a way, there's a process of listening going on, which I really welcome. So I'd just like to thank everybody who has put this together. I am going to read a tale, which is a part of a process or a project called the Refugee Tales Project. But before I do, I wanted to pick up on something that Audre Lorde says about poetry, and it's part of the way that the Refugee Tales Project talks about itself. I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute before I read. And she says, poetry is not a luxury. It is a vital necessity of our existence. It forms the quality of the light within which we predicate our hopes and dreams towards survival and change, first made into language, then into idea, then into more tangible action. Poetry is the way we help give name to the nameless so it can be thought. The farthest horizons of our hopes and fears are cobbled by our poems, carved from the rock experiences of our daily lives. And it's a beautiful quotation, but it's also part of the values, I think, of the Refugee Tales project. I'm going to read a story that I wrote back in 2016, and to say a little bit more about the project, which is an extraordinary one. To me, it shows the collaborative force of poetry and its hospitalities. It's a project that was dreamed up by the University of Kent in the UK, particularly David Hurd, the poet, and his work with the Gatwick Detainees Welfare Group, who are a charity that work with those migrants who are indefinitely detained in Brook House and Tinsley House, which are holding places, prisons really, just outside Gatwick, which is the airport, which is in the south of London. And this project brought together lots of writers, of which I am one, privileged to be one, and matched us with people who are involved and refugees themselves. So people who are in all aspects of the experience of migration, whether that be lorry drivers or people who have been themselves detained, people who are lawyers, and in my case, an interpreter, an Eritrean interpreter, who I worked with collaboratively, and in a way, what I wrote was part of him. He, as in many of the writers, actually wanted to maintain their anonymity, and part of the reason for that is to do with both not becoming visible to authorities, whether that be in their home country or in the UK. And as you probably may know, we live under what's known as, in government terms, as a hostile environment for immigration, which is becoming increasingly hostile and toxic at the moment. And this very morning, there was a piece on the news about 100 unaccompanied child migrants who have gone missing from hotels in the south of England, having crossed the Channel. It is a live and impossible and toxic issue. And what the project did was write stories along the lines of the Chaucer's Canterbury Tales and take them on the road. And it continues to have a walking project which people participate in. And I would, if you want to find out more about it, and it's a wonderful, hugely important project to end indefinite detention in the UK, then have a look at the refugeetales.org site, because the whole process is set out there. So to take you back, I spoke at length to my Eritrean translator and collaborator, and he had the oversight of what I wrote. So in fact, he did intervene in it and change it so that the information I was giving wasn't recognizable. But this is the interpreter's tale as told to me. And the epigraph for it is, "Your duty is to interpret everything that is said." And that is the Home Office Code of Conduct for registered interpreters. The interpreter's tale. Here is a passage of words. My words are given in evidence. My words form the skin of another's arrival. On the surface, they might seem untroubled, like the surface of a lake. They might seem like that to you, as if law has a calm and liquid grammar, settled even in transit. I know more about journeys than I can say. My words follow the lines of motorways. They know the violence of borders. Sometimes they wait to see if they are lucky this time. Just once is all it takes. Sometimes they are burned off like fingerprints. Words always grow back. They wait. I carry them from there to here. Here. I will tell you word for word, my word for hers. I say I. I say I for her or his I. I came from Eritrea. I was shackled. I saw people die in the desert. That day I came out of the lorry, I felt I had been born for a second time. Word for word. I am not believed. I am believed when she is not. You need to understand, I tell her. This is how it works here. They will not believe you more if you shout louder. Let me give you a word. Let's say, brother. My brother gave me money to leave. My brother sent me money to leave. Between giving and sending are continents, geography intervenes, a salience of stories, colonial maps carved up by naming and verbs. In giving, you might understand some closeness, as if he had come into the house that morning, pressed into my hand. Take this, go now. In sending, a necessary distance, as if my brother, without rights or a bank account, perhaps in Israel, already a migrant, had found a way to help me leave. Mobile contact, a choice of two words her story relies on in me, giving and sending. Truth's kinship shatters or holds us. I say brother, that is uncle. So it was not her brother who helped her. Her story isn't stacking up. I say brother, meaning the brother of my father. My uncle gave me money to leave. My uncle sent me money to leave. One word weighed along with another. Know that the k in your world, uncle, sounds like the k in our maternal brother, akal. An ear wants to find a meeting place in a word to catch in sound that switch of the heart before translation. Listen. K, 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 k. A crack in a remembered voice. Insistence of water in the mind like a dripping tap when the voice dries up. A journey becoming voiceless. A simple sound, k, hearing hope for equivalence in families. A simple sound, k, as if we begin from the same generous place in body and language. A simple sound, k, is her distress. Her whole body may be ransomed by it. I am not believed. I am believed, but she is not credible. That day she hurled all her naked words at the judge. I must translate everything that is said, find the words closest to obscenity, embellish nothing, but in the saying so much present remains unsaid, obscene, pressing around like faces of the dead or ghosted memories, crowds of wishes, fear, absence, oxygen, children, mothers, clandestine, freedom, risk, better life. I miss you. Pass or die. Words suck the air from vast containers. Learn not to breathe so they won't tell we are all here. Knock on arrival. Words are spoken in relief. Words try and move things along for now as if later it may come good. I ask, if you know it, can you tell me? So that stories aren't compelled to fill in the gaps as if politeness demands it. Respect is a freight. It can tie words up and bind you. I will tell you what you want to hear because of it. I will not hold your gaze because of it. How do you receive her? No one is spared. There was a road trip I took years after my own journey to Europe across 5 states in America. At one point, I got out of the car on a freeway. There were 7 lanes on each side. I closed my eyes and imagined the country as it would have been with buffalo, under tarmac and concrete. I thought, We have raped this land. There is no freeway across these deserts, no line on the map that tracks. Satellites might find them each time they orbit, turning Earth to grid, motion to drone ways, noticing the scurry of beetles to escape the heat, the helix motion of snakes, the roaming of dunes and stones. The pickups are crammed with people. They are transferred to larger trucks. The convoys fly across. Their drivers are often high, escaping armies and other gangs, kidnappings, raids. They break down, have to be dug out, overturned in the speed and sand. People are buried where they fall. So many unseen, unspoken bodies, as many and more as make it to the sea. I heard them threaten to take her organs. I was shot at by snipers. I waited in the house of a man with a tank in his garden. I was packed in cartons of washing powder. I saw people taken from containers and hung by the side of the road. I was detained. I was mobile and therefore a criminal. I was immobile and therefore a criminal. I wrapped my phone in plastic. I flew over sand and now I meet the shore. Now a leaky boat, now a port, now a train, now a lorry, now you. Words are tarmac and concrete. They can be prison houses or they're unlocking. We build cities from them around our freeways. We walk and occupy them. They feel given to us. How our words secure us. We, you, us, I. There's a breeze around them. They float. They extend as far as we choose. How far does brother reach? How strange is sister in her traveling? Might one word be said as well as another? A poem in Tigrinya, Aluuna, Aluana, we have, men and women. Beneath the tarmac, outside the exchange of word for word, messages scratched on the walls of caves. Money is a tentacular tax, weighs us all, weaves its tracks, buys private armies, worms into border guards, into officials, into legions of translators, phones, the ear. Money works with the season, the tax we all pay. The blowback of bodies, cruelty without limit, nothing that cannot be done to them. No punctuation to give this history reasonable measure. The longest sentence could never span the devastation, tell this story into available maps, translate this indifference as the truth it is. Your duty is to interpret everything that is said. Find composure, listen, speak. Everything is at stake each time. Everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carol. The way that you even read allows us to pause and actually really listen and hear the words. So I'm really grateful for that.
Thank you.
And leading up to this conversation as well, the question of what can words do, whether it's words used in politics, in rallies, whether it's words used in academic texts, in conferences, in webinars, or poems, just thinking about what is it that words can do. And I kept stopping at these very different moments in South African literary practice, especially. I thought of South African anti-apartheid poet James Matthews, who refused to write about flowers or dress language in too much prettiness, when the conditions that Black South Africans and non-white South Africans were forced to live with so much ugliness, so much that detached people from humanity, so much brutality. Poetry and words there for him meant directly being confrontational. They were a form, a verb, a form of confronting. And then I thought about how many poets have been imprisoned for using words, for the words that they were using as verbs to confront systems. How many of them have been tortured? How many of them have been forced to move elsewhere, to be refugees elsewhere, to seek asylum elsewhere? And then I also thought of people like Njabulani Ndebele. In 1986, he writes about rediscovering the ordinary. He's a South African poet and intellectual. And what he insists upon is that even when we write stories, that they should be quiet enough for there to be nuance. That it's not just us being a spectacle of violence. The way that nuance writes humanity in is important. The aesthetic quality is important. And I think we see that a lot in the text that you've just read. And so then we see how two different ways of even engaging with violence to humanity, to people, are being dealt with even by poets. And I find that fascinating, the fact that poetry and poets don't always need to be doing the same thing in order to be reaching for the same thing, in order to be reaching for humanity, collective humanity, where we're all respected, where we're not on the margins, but also reimagining a different way of representing ourselves. And then there was another stop that I was making as I was thinking about what you were saying, but also thinking about what freedom could mean. And there was a poet, Ntsika Kyakya, who's also a South African young poet, amongst other things. And also the other thing is that poets are, amongst other things, they're activists as well. So are scholars. And I think sometimes we do a thing where it's as if poets and politicians and scholars are not of the society, but they very much are. We very much are. So Ntsika says, he used to always say this in the early 2000s, talking about how words create, how words are actions as much as they are things that catalyze, how words take lives. By naming someone a refugee, by naming someone Kwere, by naming someone an outsider, a foreigner, by naming someone an it, that is a catalyst many times we've seen in this world for taking lives, but also how words keep us going. And I think thinking about how words in their many forms, how languages, even as song, can keep us going, I think this may be a good time to introduce Gina. Gina is a Haitian-American feminist multimedia artist, scholar, and professor of feminist studies at the University of California in Santa Cruz. Her Raison Blanche, which is gathering of ideas, things, people, and spirits approach to her art and writing practice, entails ongoing crossings and dialogues with the arts, with humanities, and social science. Yes, it is wonderful to have you here. It is wonderful to have been gathered with some of the ideas that you've already shared before we even met on this platform, Gina. I invite you to join us.
Thank you so much, Katleo, and thank you to Imagining Democracies team, as well as Poetry Africa, for inviting us. I'm going to do 3 short pieces from a project titled Voodoo Doll, What If Haiti Were a Woman? Un petit travail sous 21 points, an alternative and something other than fiction. I'm going to read another piece called New Rules of Engagement, a remix, and we're going to end with a 2-minute clip from a project last year. The doll. She's no longer as plush as she once was in certain areas since her days of glory. Still, from afar, she resembles a human cake, adorned with what would be candid poles, with flowing streamers, ready to be served at the next supper. Further inspection shows these to be tattered flags, bearing national emblems and family crest. More scrutiny reveals the pose's pins, pricked so close to parts of her that an estimate they cover Nearly 80% of her surface would not be an exaggeration. Each needle that now protrudes from her is well wedged into the hypodermis. They had either been carefully placed in various points away from her meridians to provoke nervous conditions, or were thrown for hazard from some distance. Flying arrows from blindfolded archers seeking to impress their rivals. Those who made their mark got 10 points. The ones who did not received 40. There is always a reward. The game is not about winning, but an exercise and devotion to the sport. It's always the dare. Number 4, the numbers. The ones that really matter remain unknown. Quantitative analysis may anchor some studies. They've done little to disrupt entrenched beliefs that fermented long before she became synonymous with backwardness and evil. What we still don't know is the number of religious missions offering her food, clothing, shelter, education, and of course, salvation, or the actual number of offsprings, young and old, whose laden jade distorted perihel to their fatal detriment. The contested estimates range from 20,000 to 35,000, depending on which side of the border you ask. We know the initial value ascribed to the collective lives of the dead was $750,000, which would later be reduced to $525,000. 5 plus 2 plus 5 equals 12. 1 plus 2 equals 3. A triad, triumvirate, another trinity. That is still between $26.50 and $17.50 per dead. That is $26.50 or $17.50 per dead. We don't know whom, if any, among the massacred actually benefited from this exchange, but we do know that she has long been a site for the trading of human chattel. In fact, years after she gained her freedom, one of her rulers agreed to an indemnity payment of 150 million francs for her former master to recognize and respect her. Recognition and respect that never really came. What we know for sure is that the term, with its 4 dangerous little O's that continuously distorts perceptions of her, and quotation on Google, results in 27,300,000 hits in 13 seconds. The word voodoo yields 3,870,000 in 28 seconds, while Vodou, VAUDOUX, produces 13,600 hits in about 6 seconds. Vodun, 120,000 hits in 26 seconds. All of that, of course, was well before 112-2010. The rage, her rage. It is as if her rage had been suppressed, or at the very least continues to be properly or evenly guarded, managed, gagged and bound with both arms seemingly loose, wrists crossed behind her, ankles one on top of the other, Christ-like, angled downwards, disciplined by the sheer weight of pieces of broken chain held together with wet silken ropes. No one talks of who actually tends to these, the ropes. We know they continue to gain strength with more moisture, water, molasses, honey, toes strained en pointe, seeking contact with the earth. How did she get here? How did she get here? A slight move, a purposeless shove, or a well-directed intended push from a passerby certainly guarantees a rotation. why she is still here, obsesses those who refuse to grasp that alone she could not have hooked herself so high above ground. She could not have hooked herself so high above ground, perched so high on this extended branch, constantly twirling for all to see her once revered beauty. No one wants to hear her. No one wants to hear her. Very few pay attention to her screams when rage escapes her lips, especially in mixed company. Almost without fail, someone in the audience will recall the presence of white saviors. The debt. All but 21 of the trillion pores ooze nursed envy. If with interest, 90 million gold francs reduced from the original 150 million is equivalent to 21,685,235,571.48 in 2004, then what would be her value in cowries today? What would be her value in cowries today? She was desperate for recognition, desperate for recognition, desperate for recognition. She borrowed. And of course, they lent. New rules of engagement, a remix. You and I have had a date with history. You and I have had a date with history. I've been standing here facing you for some time now, impatiently waiting to hear you tell me when I can move, I can't breathe. To hear you tell me when I can take the step that won't offend, when I can take the step that won't offend, when I can take the step that won't offend, when I can take the step that won't threaten you, I can't breathe. And one too many of the instances I have choked always a bit more, refusing to wait for a deliverance, refusing to wait for a deliverance that won't come, a deliverance that can't come. I can't breathe as the wheel spins and spins and spins and spins and spins. I can't breathe, only to keep spinning and keep spinning and keep spinning and keep spinning and won't stop until we say we won't get on the bus and actually don't get on the bus. Until we say we won't get on the bus and actually don't get on the bus and actually don't get on the bus. I can't breathe, too desperate for spaces where I can live in my own skin, 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 where we can breathe in the castles of our skin. I can't breathe. This is why I can't wait. This is why I can't wait. This is why I won't wait. This is why I can't wait. This is why I won't wait. This is why I can't wait. This is why I won't wait. This is why I can't wait. This is why I won't wait. This is why I can't wait. This stops today, Eric Garner had said. This stops today. This is why we can't wait. This is why we won't wait. Too many have already died, continue to die for us to be here. I can't breathe as spirits are under siege and bullets fly. I can't breathe as spirits are under siege and bullets fly, bullets fly, bullets fly, bullets fly. We keep waiting for history to absolve us. We keep waiting for history to absolve us. We keep waiting for history to absolve us. I can't breathe. So when I tell you I won't start here, when I tell you I won't start here because my ancestors, our ancestors have already been there. I can't breathe when we say we won't, can't start, we can't start here, we won't start here because our ancestors have already been there. You better know that I'm on the offense. You better know that I am on the offense because I can't breathe. I can't breathe in this battlefield, spinning new manifestos for dreamers while standing on the bodies of our young and the carcasses of our ancestors. We are ready. We are ready. We are ready. We are ready. We are determined. We are ready. We will breathe. So now we are going to watch a little video. Thank you.
Streams demand our silence before we answer. Peaks ask us to reflect on who we would like to be hereafter. Our libraries move, even in death. Badimu and healers find the means to decipher our uncertainties, narrating lost, convoluted manuscripts through our visions and dreams. Our libraries must move. They must hold colloquiums in skyscrapers under desert suns and in caves too, under baobabs and corrugated roofs. Our libraries have work to do. They must move. Teach notation and words in languages spoken by people of our world. They must move even when we are under construction. They must strengthen their content and help us rework the systems of categorizations and symbols of our existence. Our libraries must move, not simply that. Our libraries must live. And your work and invoking ancestry and thinking about how ancestry is not past, is very much present, it's very much future. Our knowledges are not new innovations. The fact that we hold knowledge is not a new thing. So we are not recreating that. We are borrowing, learning, and building off of something that already exists. Philippa, I would like to introduce Philippa de Villiers, our next poet. Philippa, wonderful South African poet who really does a lot of work in helping us also think about identities as we're thinking about ancestry, as we are thinking about how we relate to each other through words. Philippa's work, a lot of it makes us think about who we are and what our place is. She really does the work of grounding us as people and not forgetting that we are people in relation to others. So Philippa de Villiers lectures at the Creative Writing at Wits, University of Johannesburg, an alumni of Rhodes University, an actor, a teacher at Market Theatre Laboratory, and she has also worked in television and screenwriting for years. Many of the people in this conversation, she has published widely and has been seen widely. So Philippa, wondering if you can join us. Welcome to the conversation.
Thank you so much. Yes, hello. I'm very happy to be here. I see that I'm unmuted myself. Am I unmuted? Yes. That's good. Okay, beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to Carol and Gina and to you, Patrick, for this very rich conversation. It's kind of giving me a lot of things to think about, and I'm thinking also about this idea of governance, about democracy, and who are we? I've been thinking about this quite a lot recently because I was visiting a friend of mine, Kitika Ntuli, who's a sculptor, poet, polyglot, and a healer. And he was doing a radio show, and he ended up having a very interesting engagement with somebody who was saying, who are we? Who are we? And so I guess I want to just turn things around a little bit and come to this idea of our humanity as South Africans. And then to relatively recent events and how our humanity was put under intense pressure. So the first poem I wanted to do was going to be like the bottom of democracy, the terrifying part of democracy, where rage, emotions, wipe out thought, and we have no agency. So this poem is called Homo Sum, and it is inspired by Terence, the African slave of 2,000 years ago, who was spoken about by Maya Angelou, who said, "Nothing human is alien to me." So here's this poem, and I hope that it is legible to all of us, to Carol where she is, to Gina where she is, and to all of you where you are. Homo Sum. Separation is an illusion that benefits no one but the sowers of terror. In freedom's house, two dogs reside, one called fear, one called love. Which one is stronger? The one that you feed. I have never tried to pass that way, but I understand service. A doctor has restored health, teacher has fed wealth, growing people beyond their wildest imagining. Like Terence, I insist nothing human is alien to me. I refuse the destiny of slavery, strum the cords that bind me to the unchangeable protean truth that we are human and capable of much, but I too stand amazed as human destructiveness and pain plunges a dagger into the beggar's remaining eye and protest. Such wounding can't be wished away. They say the eye is less vital than the heart. If we can feel as well as we see, perhaps we'll be free. A blind man once showed me the way to make sound. Listening with his heart, Yonela Nana walked from Limpopo to outer space. He speeds through darkness, a comet, and I wonder how a blind man turns himself into a star, still bright 1,000 years from now. And the artist who brought him to the bank of his burning river. Artists, burning flowers that cool the mind. Zuma, you claimed to be human as an excuse, and we forgave you. Also, human is the desperate mother unable to get formula for 3 days, trying to sleep in a house torn apart by a baby's ravenous cries. In your name, an army is preparing a harvest of new orphans. Meanwhile, humans wearing stethoscopes will life to return. Painters draw out the demons and nurses speak in gentle voices to quiet the hideous fear. Homo Sum. Separation is an illusion that benefits no one but the sowers of fear. We feed the dog called love. Let us your ears. So that was a response to the riots that happened in South Africa, and actually it really affects this province of KwaZulu-Natal, which is where Poetry Africa is taking place. So for me, there was a lot of anger, and it was without direction, and it did not benefit poor African people, especially women and mothers. So I guess I'm always writing poems that are addressing our presidents in some way, and perhaps that is the one that is addressing, although it mentions President Zuma, former President Zuma, it actually is addressing President Ramaphosa. But the poem that I would like to share that speaks to former President Zuma is also about a lack of agency, being a victim, and I guess that's a lot of what poets write about, being a victim. So this poem came about when former President Zuma, before he was president, he was accused of rape. I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know if I was raped or not. The uncle who held my hand and wiped the ice cream off my black patent leather shoes and then surprisingly stuck his tongue between my teeth? I'm not sure. He bought me another ice cream. The time I got my new orange hot pants and the yellow patent and paraded him, and he smiled and told me I was beautiful and asked me when I was turning 12, and I laughed and said, only after I've turned 11. Clamped in his caress, his eyes searching mine, asking, is that nice, baby, is it nice? It was sore, but he seemed to need me to say yes, so I did. But it was sore, so I don't know if it was my fault or not, because I lied. He always told me I was beautiful. I'm not sure if I was raped or not. I wanted a massage. His hands are really strong and he's used to my body. He's taken care of me before. You can say one thing or 55 things. I said thank you because he was giving me so much. I was really stuck with nowhere to live. He gave me more than I was asking for. I really did only want a place to sleep and a massage, but I don't know if I was raped because that short word is so much a piece of darkness stuffed into a screaming mouth. I don't know. I'm not sure. It's my uncle. He gave me a massage. He was helping me out. So I guess in sharing that poem, in writing that poem, I was kind of responding to a moment in history that sort of resonated with my own experience. And so as a poet, I was able to actually make the political and the very public, very personal. And I think that is one of the ways that we can contribute to our societies. And so it's also another dark moment in the idea of democracy. And then the final poem I would like to share was commissioned by the Commonwealth Trust in 2014. And when this was done, former President Nelson Mandela had just passed away, and I was asked to reflect on the contribution of the latest son of the Commonwealth, and mindful about the appropriation of Mandela by the powers that be, because he was ours, he was not theirs, and they had designated him as terrorist, as Maggie Thatcher had said that the ANC were terrorists. And so I was very uncomfortable with that appropriation of Nelson Mandela. So and also I was also uncomfortable with the idea that he, as an individual, was able to do so much for the world, when I know he was a man and he was an individual, and in terms of where we come from, we are a composite. So this poem is called Courage. It takes more. It takes more than breath to be alive, more than blood to find your line, more than a hand to throw a stone. It takes a heart beaten into bricks and built into a house where humanity finds a home. The house is in the street, and the street lies on the land, a land of corpses and speeches, a land of lies. The lies that we tell to keep the best for our own family, country, God, whatever we imagine is our home. The best of us are rivers who give themselves to oceans, rivers who throw themselves over cliffs into oceans, rivers who never look back, who never regret what they've given. And the more they give, the more flows out. The more they give, the more flows out. Will you, won't you walk behind Mandela? Follow his feet along Justice Street. Won't you, will you beat your heart into a home for all humanity? He was not alone. A million hands held him up, Colossus. And there is no house without mortar, no wall without foundation, no Mandela without Mbeki, Sisulu, Dadu, no Biko without Ngoyi, without Sebukwe, without Goldberg, no Fisher without Slovo, without First. And will you walk behind them and shout freedom through your thirst, spend your breath for justice, to prison or to death? It takes more than you think you have, but you are a river, and heroes are heroes because we make them into heroes. Mutu, Kimutu, Kabatu, Babang. River, ocean, falling into the sun, and when all languages are forgotten and this day of life is done, only when we stand together can we say that we have one heart, one love, one. So thank you very much for that opportunity, and I would just also like to say that I'm indebted to Becky Peterson, Professor Becky Peterson, who gives words to us to speak about the contribution of artists in what he calls the Black public humanities. In his book about Mhudi, at 100 years, he says that writers, artists, were all created method or genre of creative meditation that is creatively thinking through, rather than philosophizing or theorizing in conventional ways, a range of difficult historical, political, and social questions and challenges. And I think that democracy is a difficult historical, political, and social question, and the role of the individual to the collective is also one of those. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippa. Thank you to all of you, Carol, Gina, Philippa. We are moving into a moment where we are able to open ourselves up to conversation, but where we invite you as the audience as well. If you have conversation, if you have questions, if you have comments, we'll be happy to incorporate it into the last 10-ish minutes of this webinar, 20 minutes of this webinar. But what I'd like to say is what we've seen here is there are many moments of multiplicity and understanding that democracy, freedom means multiple things, where we understand that we are in communion, not only just to other human beings or not only just to our communities, but to other human beings who might not be part of our community and to non-humans as well. One question that was asked earlier on before the webinar began, we were having a discussion, is democracy just for humans? But here what we've also heard is a real emphasis on thinking about how knowledge production, on how the arts gives us a moment and an opportunity to face our humanity in its ugliness, in its incredibleness, in its power, in its weaknesses, and how then poetry also allows us to imagine a freedom, to insist on it. Something about how even when we hold the light to the parts of us that are not so pretty, there's hope. Whenever there's critique, there is some kind of hope. We're either hoping to change the system, or we are hoping to create an alternative way of being free. So I also would like us to think about futures, because initially there was also us thinking about the work that we do, the work that other poets and intellectuals do, the work that politics we imagine should do. What kinds of futures are we all thinking about, and how do we get there through our work? I'm opening it up to, yes, Carol.
I was struck by something that in Gina's presentation, the video, where you say, without visions, we don't know what to build. And I've been thinking about that as we've been moving through and listening to Philippa too, about thinking that we live by really brutalizing dominant imaginaries. And to me, that work of imagination is a material work. And I think that we live by these dominant imaginaries, and what the poetry can do is in a way render those imaginaries porous to alternative. And it was struck me that moment, without visions we don't know what to build, is that it's the visions that we put into play, which are really difficult ones, and which have to contend with the kinds of questions that were coming up in Philippa's work around the terror, the sowers of terror and the sowers of fear, and living with fear especially, which is a planetary question as well as a specific one to particular struggles, seems to be really important, and poetry has a role in opening up. And we are each other's magnitudes. I really like that phrase, that moment. Is discovering those magnitudes and listening to others, and also knowing when to listen, I think, which is the other important potential really in listening to poetry, with the richness of what we've been hearing this afternoon. Anyway, those are my thoughts, but that's the hook. There are these hooks which sit there, and then you kind of have to run with them.
And I also just think that from all of our different expressions, which are so varied in the material that they bring forth about being human, I think the question of silence and being quiet, because sometimes you can't hear while you're speaking, but there is also a very important role of speaking out, and that is we've taken our democratic right to use our voices to speak about this injustice, which we take personally, and which is personal, in order to effect some kind of liberation.
Thank you so much for that. I want to answer, or at least speak to Carol's point, because these are not my words. That piece, the clip is from a piece called Black Liberation Mashup, which includes a number of activists, writers, academics, artists. And so Without New Visions, We Don't Know What to Build is actually from Robin D.G. Kelly, the historian, and his book Freedom Dreams. And I ended that piece with one of my favorite poets, Gwendolyn Brooks, who says, "We are each other's harvest, we are each other's business, we are each other's magnitude and bond." So it's really important that credit be given where credit is due, so people are aware that what I've done with that work, that's one of my rassemblage pieces, where I brought together voices of Black artists, poets from throughout the Black diaspora. It's a much larger work, and we just got to see 2 minutes from it. What I wanted to also say in response to just listening to us, I mean, I was struck by the commonalities in terms of our topics of interest, in terms of translation, significance of that, and what happens to word and meaning and how words determine lives. Right, and then the beautiful delivery, and with the sounds of the which I'm always gonna remember. So thank you for that, Carol, and also for listening to you. I kept thinking of June Jordan, thinking about a poem about my rights, and it's just really sort of bringing together some of the as much as we have. Things that distance us geopolitically in some ways, we also have these shared histories where our expression around trying to recognize, name our human experiences within our human condition, there's so many similarities. And I love to say that we have more in common than we do not. But I also thought about, and I'm going to look for it, that quote from Toni Morrison, right, when she said, "This is precisely the time when artists go to work. Mm-hmm. There is no time for despair, no place for self-pity, no need for silence, no room for fear. We speak, we write, we do language. That is how civilizations heal." And just thinking through also that part of the work that we're doing is by naming, is to sort of get that process going of healing, because we need to sit with these horrors if we're going to deal with them and get through them.
Yeah. Oh, Philippa, unmute.
Yeah, and kudos as well to that affirmation that the revolution begins with ourselves and with our own healing, and that our own healing is a form of resistance and is necessary, deeply necessary and political, kudos to that. Kudos to the generations, the lineages that have told us that, and we're going to keep that song going.
Yes, and definitely also what's come up, even as you speak, Philippa, but as we've gone through each of our poems and our thinking about what democracy means, what personal and public politics mean, very much intertwined. One thing that it's escaped me now. It's escaped me. It'll come back. But as I reach back for it, oh yes, the idea that the personal and the individual is always connected to other humans. So even as we create our own work, not striving to be the center of it all as if we come as one unit, like even as we think about the revolution starting with the self, knowing that even within us, there are many selves. And as Gina was talking, I was thinking about Koleka Putuma's piece, Lifeline, and how she goes through 3-4 pages of listing all of the women and femme humans who have contributed to her thinking internationally, right? And like some of their personal relationships as well. And at the end of it, she says, "You will think this is not a poem." And cool, I agree. Every one of these have been ways, and I'm paraphrasing, but every one of these people have been people who have been lifelines to me. There've been songs that are telling me to go, Black girl, go. And it's great to be in a space where we understand that ourselves, or our as people self, is interconnected with other selves.
Sorry, can I just say, like one of the things that I had written and that I can't get to on my computer, but you're just reminding me, like when we started to think about
Okay, come back, unmute yourself.
that in fact, the richest of us is only as rich as the poorest of us.
Mm-hmm.
The healthiest of us is only as healthy as the weakest of us, you know, and the thickest of us. And for that reason, we cannot move forward unless we always think about who we can take with us, as Don Mandela always used to say. And, you know, you can only take people that are willing to come. But also, as much as you have these great visions and ideas, if you don't take into consideration that there's the opposite who's working very strongly at everything that you're trying to do, you will not make headway. Yeah. And I think that to actually come to what you can control, which is in you, you know, which you can actually develop your consciousness, you can focus inwards, you can maybe do more there than you can out there for the beginning, you know, of this revolution.
Yeah. We also have, I'm just going to move us along a little bit from here, and we have a question from Gigi Gosnell. Gigi asks, how do you write poetry on big concepts such as freedom, democracy, and autocracy? Anyone can take it.
I mean, for me, I am thinking about meta, anything sort of larger structures. I come to them through detail, ethnographic detail, in order to show the connection between the minutia and the larger structure, right? Because just thinking about the piece that I did, for example, from Voodoo Doll about Haiti, where I focused in on the massacre that happened at the border of the Dominican Republic, you know, the point where I said it's going to be $17 or $26 per dead. Here I am speaking to a broader, larger political moment, but by honing in on the this kind of specific detail, I'm actually able to show, or I hope so, the human impact, right? And exactly, that's right. It's like how the personal has always been political, and for a lot of us, the political has always been personal. Mm-hmm. So thinking, you know, both broadly and minutia at the same time. I don't think it's a matter of, you know, or even thinking about freedom. I can't breathe. I mean, Eric Gardner, when he said it multiple times, he couldn't breathe, right? And the fact that, you know, he was killed the way that he was killed, we get to think about the police state that we live in, the power of authority figures who are supposed to be protecting our lives and protecting us, and forcing us to then have to contend with what is freedom if you're not able to guard your life. Right. So I mean, I think for me, it's a matter of thinking relationally, and so that's one of the ways that I approach it, and as a way also to focus on the most immediate impact, because I do think, for, you know, as an anthropologist, as an ethnographer, and an artist, one of the ways. What I try to do is to, and I'm thinking about what Philippa said earlier, to not just engage the eye, right, or the mind, but also the mind in relation to the heart, right, so that we have sort of a broader and fuller picture.
Mm-hmm. And Carol, I know that when you are thinking about terms like democracy, when you're thinking about terms of like freedom, you're also not simply, I mean, none of us are, but you are more expressly also thinking about the world around us, the environment around us, non-humans. So maybe you want to also come in and think about, and help us think about, how do we write democracy and freedom in relation to these kinds of
thoughts?
I suppose I think it's an ongoing process of trying to learn what that's like. And at the moment, thinking about the political is always somehow socio-natural. Socio-nature is both. For me, it's very difficult to sort of separate out nature as if it's somehow distinct, because we live with, and it is a relational set of questions. So, and politics has to happen there. You can't, in a way, for me, it's about trying to think about political agency, but within the social and the natural as imbricated and historically imbricated. So some of the ways I've been working on it recently are slightly counterintuitive, because I do a lot of site-specific work. So at the moment I'm working on a pond, strangely, a pond that doesn't have any water in it, which is a scratchy, marginal urban pond that people leave things in and is full of litter and so on. It happens to be a space where there have been rebellions and revolutions for hundreds of years, including suffragettes doing speeches from there, and the peasants' revolts against poll tax were there, and they gave speeches from there. When Adam dealt and Eve Span, who was then the gentleman, it was speeches given from that spot, and it's now this scratchy, marginal little pond that it has had no water in it for months. So I've been writing in relation to that. So it's a bit, as Gina was saying, it's about the small in a way, and going in on things which are everyday, and trying to kind of get at the bigger questions through attention, kinds of attention. I'm trying to think about different kinds of ways of being attentive, and that includes silence, actually. And in this case, it's been a strangely remorseless project of visiting it most days for over a year and taking photographs and seeing what people leave there and who goes there and what they do with it. So don't think that answers the question about the bigger questions, but it's the only way I can get at those bigger issues, because I find they surface anyway. And the violences that I was particularly struggling with Elizabeth's point about the sowers of terror. We just seem to live in environments that produce fear and terror all of the time. And obviously there are specificities as to the different struggles going on in different places, but that does seem to be a thing in common. And certainly you can see it in the way that refugees and migrants are treated in the UK. We're not unusual in that. There are histories as well to excavate, I think. So there's a kind of an excavation going on, and it's in language. I was looking up my pond the other day. In the 18th century, there were refugees who came through and were in tents up there, and it's up on a hill. And Daniel Defoe and others wrote about these refugees, and there were these terribly vicious pieces written in the newspapers at the time saying, what freak put those people there? And that was, 1709. And so nothing's changed at that, the level of that. So language, the excavating of language and its etymologies and its histories yields up quite often these kinds of struggles and debates. And that's why it's really important to have people who tell stories, of different kinds, and that's why it's visions and challenging different kinds of imaginaries, I think. That's what poetry can do.
And we certainly do hear your attention to words in themselves and the language. And what I didn't do at the beginning is also just after your reading, just to read how someone from the audience, Jolene Ryson, responded to your work, saying that, Carol, your reading drew me in, pushed me out, drew me in, raised me up, drew me in, rolled me under, drew me in, crushed my feet, drew me in like waves. Thank you. So just paying attention to that. We have 2 more minutes left, and I don't know if anyone has a last poem to share or last words they would like to share before we close.
Well, I just want to say that once again, with Black Liberation Mashup, the revolution starts in the self. With the self is Tony K. Pambara. again, that my work really this project uses the works of other artists precisely to try to tell a more contemporary story, but that's building on their wisdom and their actual words. So again, giving credit where credit.
But it's like a community. There's a community of those exchanges. I mean, like you were talking about everyone that's transformed someone, who's made you who you are, but we are in this huge community, and those fragments and echoes and that language is there. And it's part of the resource, but it's also ways of building community out of it. And the community building that goes on in the poetry spaces is really important. It's part of the politics of being a poet, I think, is to listen to those multiple voices and acknowledge them and repeat them.
Yeah. Philippa, you have the last word.
Oh, but I was going to say that thank you very much, Katlego. I think that in a sense we are also speaking back to history and speaking forward to the future by bringing in the voices that have informed us and clarified the path for us, and to add our reflections and our personal, the minutiae of our struggles to the mix, and opening it up across continents. This is amazing. We have been a community for the last hour and a half, and thank you very much. It's been wonderful, and I'm very grateful to both to all the poets and to the audience for their questions as well.
Yes. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Gina. Thank you, Philippa. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Poetry Africa, for having us. It has been incredible. Feeling like we had bits of Haiti, South Africa, a little bit of Ghana, a little bit of UK, but a little bit of the sea as well, different kinds of lands. So thank you for all the parts that you let us travel to. And thank you to the audience as well.